Greetings and welcome to the 55th episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases. As always, I'm your host, Tygirwulf, and today we have another random themed episode of 13 mods for your viewing pleasure with a really interesting mix of both newer and older mods. And there's a ton of epic sights to see in this episode, but more on that in a moment. Real quick, I kind of need to apologise. This episode is airing a bit late, and a lot of that has to do with the past week or two because there was a bake sale and I was making a lot of baklava, and if you know anything about baklava, it's a very time-consuming process to make, and, well, basically I made about 10 pounds of baklava, and, they sold really well for the charity bakery sale that goes to help the hungry and all that, but it did take a lot of time, perhaps more time than I had intended. I probably spent about a dozen hours in the last week just baking baklava, which is pretty insane. So that's really the main reason why this episode is airing so late, and I did want to, just point out real quick that you can, see weekly updates on the channel's predicted schedule for each week over on our Patreon page. These are public posts, so if you want to get an idea of what videos, to expect on any particular week, you can, check that out. Though delays are pretty much inevitable at this point, as, evidenced by how late this episode is. So while we're going to try and keep to a particular schedule, sometimes, delays are going to happen regardless. But anyway, as always, you can find a list of download links for all mods shown down in the video description below. So why don't we just go ahead and get started with our popular mod of the week. But before we do that, we do have a quick message from our sponsors. So let's just air that real quick and then we'll get right to the episode. By the Nine Divines, that Fargoth's power level is over 9,000. What madness is this? It's Morrowind's Modding Madness 2016. Join us as we partake in the madness of competitive creativity as we offer ourselves up as humble tributes to our patron saint, Lord Tygirwulf. Register your team today and join in with your most innovative and creative modding ideas in gladiatorial team-on-team modding creativity, the likes of which you've never seen before. And what are you waiting for? The competition starts December 1st. Find your team members and register your team today, and there will be Fargoths and cheese for everyone. Anyway, back to our popular mod of the week. This week we have Elegant Hlaalu by Tygirwulf. And I know we don't normally showcase a new meshes and textures mod like this in the popular mod category, but because we're so far behind schedule of Morrowind modding showcases, and because the new meshes and textures category is one of the most active and popular types of mods for Morrowind, we'll actually be covering a few different texture and mod replaces in this episode, starting with this newest retexture for the Hlaalu architecture set. Now, some of you may already be familiar with Tygirwulf's previous work. We showcased some of his texture mods before in the Morrowind modding textures series, I think, including one of his older Hlaalu retextures, the Aztec Hlaalu retexture that we covered in one of the first few episodes of our texture series. Though Elegant Hlaalu is obviously quite different from that older replacer. The goal here, according to the author, was to make the architecture of Great House Hlaalu feel a bit more, well, wealthy, as befits the status of Hlaalu being a major trade and a merchant house. So this means the textures here are a bit richer, cleaner, and, more opulent than what you might find in vanilla Morrowind. And anyway, you'll notice the walls of the buildings here kind of have a lower sort of almost brick-like pattern to the textures here, while the upper parts are, mostly smooth, plaster-like textures, and they're all, very clean with a sort of light tan colouring. That's a fair bit lighter than the original vanilla Hlaalu textures, I think. Now, I believe Mike and I mentioned possibly making a version of Tygirwulf's textures here with a more, sort of worn look, since in this version they do look, very clean and newish, which, given the harsh conditions of Ardenfell with the ash storms and the blight and all that, might be a little unrealistic otherwise. But I don't know if he still plans to do that. He still hasn't released epic tree stumps after all, and at this rate it'll be delayed until 2090. But I'm getting a bit off topic. Here you can see the interior textures, and again they're a much lighter colour and hue than what's found in vanilla Morrowind, making these interiors slightly brighter than they otherwise would be. And they have plaster ceilings with tiled stone floors, which are, all basically of a similar colour scheme. And in any event, this is certainly an interesting and modern take on the Hlaalu textures, and this is certainly a texture pack to, sort of keep an eye on. Though we'll have to do a full-on comparison video at some point to show off the now 35 Hlaalu retextures side by side to help give you guys a better idea of what you might want in your game. But moving on, for our house mod of the week this week, we have Bagel's Luxurious Manor by MatthewTheBagel. And this mod adds a new quest that starts out when you run into a particularly snobby and haughty high elf in Vivek, who apparently has just been robbed by a thief, and he wants you to track down the brigand. But anyway, this will take you to a new ancestral tomb outside of Vivek, which is a fairly small dungeon that you'll need to fight through in order to track down the thief in particular. And of course, once you do all that, this house is all yours for the taking. And you can see it here south of Ebonheart on a small new island. And the house pretty much, takes up the entire island with a main manor, a bridge to the mainland, and a docks out back. It should be mentioned that this mod is compatible with temporary built, if anyone's curious about that. And overall, the exterior of the house is, pretty nice looking. Even a bit quaint, I would say. And inside you'll find a fairly nice looking abode, including a large lounge area with a few couches and even a game of chess. And through here in the back, you'll find the parlor and kitchen and dining room. And the table here has already been set, and, there's a fair amount of decorations already here, but, there's also plenty of space for you to, add your own items as well. And naturally, there's also a second floor, and this is where you'll find the primary study and library of the house, which is already beautifully pre-decorated with lots of books on the shelves for you to, peruse at your leisure, including a few about the Morrowind mainland in temporary built. And anyway, going back out in the hall here, you'll find a desk down at the end, which includes a teleport amulet, along with instructions that you can use to, teleport back home at any time. You'll also find a display hall on the second floor, including a number of armor display mannequins that you can use to display armor and clothing, and, whatever other apparel that you might want to display on here. And upstairs, on what I believe is the third floor, you'll find the master bedroom, including a large bed for your personal use, as well as more pre-decorated shelves, and also up here is a small bathroom, up here in the back, where you can, take a nice hot steamy bath if you so desire. Now, one last thing to point out here, there's also a large basement to this property, where you'll find not one, not two, but 3 guest bedrooms where your companions can sleep, or where you can, store any extra NPC staff that you have, and this is just a really nice house mod overall. This week's gameplay of the week is To the Death by Fliggerty, and this is one of Fliggerty's numerous Morrowind scripting extender mods, and this one basically allows you to challenge anyone on Vvardenfell to a duel in the Vivek arena, legally speaking, that is. You obviously have to get their disposition down pretty though, and even then, they may not always, want to duel, and, some people are just too busy to bother with such, petty contests. But others will be quick to accept. But that doesn't mean you can go right to the arena and kill them. There's rules that you have to follow. Like, say you've challenged Fargoth to a duel, then you'll have to go to the duel master's offices in Vivek and pay a fee in order to do the duel. And if you were the one to issue the duel challenge, then that means the NPC in question is the one to set the conditions of the fight, and they'll be the ones to decide what weapon to use, and whether or not it's actually to the death or to some other condition, like first blood or a certain health percentage threshold. And if instead an NPC challenges you to a duel, which, can happen, then you'd be the one to make the rules. Either way, once the conditions are set, you have to put all of your equipment into this chest here, and be issued a set of, approved arena equipment for the duel in particular. And only after you've done all that, can you actually meet your opponent in the arena, and in the case of Fargoth, because he's such a flaw sweet, you'll be doing fisticuffs, and only until one of you is on the ground, not dead. Bloody Bosma don't want to do anything to the death, it seems. They're such, cowards and the like. Now, most of the time when you're facing someone in the arena, you'll be playing by their set of rules and conditions. So that means you'll be using their best weapon skill, which can, include magic-based attacks only. So if you're challenging someone from the Mages Guild, they'll probably choose Destruction Magic as a weapon of choice for the arena, and keep in mind, though, that you can't loot their body afterwards. And of course, just to show off one additional arena fight here, you can, get armor and longswords as well, and this is just one way to legally remove NPCs that you don't particularly like. Next up, we have our Dungeon Mod of the Week, which this week is Baelin Underground by JSP25, and I do apologise, I'm probably going to be mispronouncing the name Baelin quite a lot in here. And this is basically an expansion of the vanilla game dungeon, or rather the Imperial Run Diamond Mine, and it starts out with a slight alteration to the main chamber, including a new mining shack. There's a few miners' quarters that have been added in here and there for when the miners are, off work, but past that you'll find the older part of the mines, and this mod adds a series of abandoned mining tunnels left behind by the Imperials due to, some unknown reason, including these dark passages that burrow into the depths below that are, strangely empty of any opponents to face, but still bears some, mining clutter with, turned over mining carts and abandoned dining areas for the miners. Of course, this naturally opens up into an even bigger set of mining caverns, filled with miners' shacks and equipment, where the Imperials were apparently excavating something before, sealing the whole passageway off for some strange and curious reason. And the meat of this content actually lies a bit further beyond, as you'll notice a distinct lack of enemies before you finally enter a set of Dwemer ruins. But real quick, I did want to take a look at some of these miner shacks, a few of which have rats and, things like that in them, and there's also a few scattered documents providing a slight background story to the place. Moving on into the Dwemer ruins though, you'll encounter an advanced Steam Centurion right through the front door here, and this is actually a really difficult fight. It gave my cheat character here a bit of a whacking, honestly. So I'd probably recommend maybe level 20 to 25 as a good starting point for a lot of the content in this dungeon, since most of the enemies are more powerful than their vanilla counterparts. And there's a fair bit of variety in this dungeon, with, Dwemer ruins combining with caverns to make for a sort of, cool and run-down ancient Dwemer facility to explore. And while I don't want to reveal too much, and, I probably already have actually, I did just want to show off just a bit of the Lava Grotto here, because it's one of the really iconic locations in this mod, and there's a fair bit of content not shown here for you to explore on your own. And if you're looking for a dungeon mod that could, potentially blend in with vanilla Morrowind, this might be a mod that's worth checking out. For our items of the week this week, we have Stormkiss Reforged by Javalt aka Stavrogan and Enclave Killer. And basically what this mod does is it uses one of the perhaps more unknown quests in vanilla Morrowind, given by this Nord here, to add a new set of armor and a new weapon to the game, using the pre-existing tomb of an ancient Nord warrior. And this was a pretty exciting place to discover in vanilla Morrowind, but it was a little disappointing because it didn't actually have any unique loot in it. And now, besides a new set of unique armor and weapons that you can pick up here, this mod also adds a few journal updates and a scripted attack of undead spirits when you try and disturb this Nord's grave here. And in any event, you can see this new armor set and weapon here, and it's a really cool looking set of armor as well, with a fair amount of detail in the models, and uniquely different from anything else you can find in the game, while remaining, somewhat similar to some of the armor styles that you see on Solstheim. Now, I believe this is a set of medium armor, and the weapon is of course a two-handed axe with a modest enchant on it that isn't, too powerful. And it's all pretty much, mid-range to high-level gear, and the armor is actually quite valuable, coming in at between, 4,000 and 10,000 gold apiece, which is a nice reward for a sweet dungeon raid. I definitely highly recommend checking this one out. This week's quest of the week is the lamp by My Eyes, and before we really get into this mod showcase, I sort of need to make a disclaimer here. There may well be a few spoilers in this showcase, unfortunately with quest mods. That's often, kind of unavoidable when you're doing a showcase like this, but I especially want to give you guys a warning because this is a really amazing and well-crafted quest mod, and I don't want to, spoil it for you if I can help it. So if you prefer, you can just, skip over this mod and jump over to the Landmass Mod if you prefer to find out everything about the lamp for yourself. But anyway, this mod starts out when one of the vendors in Nissa sells you a curious antique, a mysterious lamp that they've discovered, but it isn't in the best condition and you'll need to find someone to fix it. And this will lead you to a curious antique shop here in Nissus, located in the trade house for those curious, and it's called the Locked Box, which actually has a strange assortment of various goods and old items decorating the shelves here, and the Khajiit owner will gladly take the lamp off your hands with the promise of repairing it in exchange for getting something from the bookshop owner in Vivek. And so far so normal, right? Well, this is where, potential spoilers may come in, for once you return, you'll find no one behind the counter, just a fixed lamp, and should you try and pick it up, it'll summon a rat on a flying carpet, and suddenly the back end of the shop is no longer a shop, but a Daedric shrine, and you'll be advised to meet with the rat's master waiting in her chambers beyond these Daedric walls that have, just suddenly appeared, and before your very eyes, a Daedric shrine will lift up out of the void, with water falling to the sides, and Mephala herself will appear before you, and by activating it, you have inadvertently summoned her, and you may ask her for whatever you desire, and it shall be granted. But be careful though, for depending on what you ask, you'll be sent along a different path, whether, power or knowledge. And this is a truly grand adventure mod, an epic quest that'll send you off to, far off realms or hidden off chambers with puzzles to solve, fights to face, and a history of rich lore that you get to experience firsthand. And I'm deliberately keeping this showcase a bit short because the lab is an experience best left unspoiled, and while I haven't shown off much here, just trust me when I say there's a ton of amazing content here, and it's well worth experiencing, and I would even go so far as to say that this is probably one of my personal favourite mods released so far in 2016. I really can't recommend playing it enough, it's definitely worth checking out. Next up we have our Landmass Mod of the week, which this week is the Ebony Blade by Astian. And this mod actually starts out when you meet a grief-stricken NPC in the tavern in Caldera. Apparently he's the sole survivor of a treasure-seeking expedition that went terribly wrong, and his good friend paid the ultimate price. He has quite a story to tell, and should you be of a high enough level, he's willing to part with a map to a mysterious new island, and fair warning, you must be level 30 in order to start this quest. That part isn't optional, it's a requirement, so you need to have a character that's already at level 30, or level up a character to level 30 before you can actually start this quest mod. And anyway, before you can travel to this new and mysterious island, you'll need to, find a ship to take you there first, and there's one outside of Dragonfell you can hire. But first you'll need to help the captain, as she's convinced one of the crew is plotting a mutiny, and needs you to track them all down and find evidence to throw one of them off on shore before you depart. Making the wrong choice could have dire consequences further down the line, so that's just, something you need to keep in mind. And in any event, you'll eventually arrive at this small island covered in Daedric ruins, and truth be told, this is really another epic quest mod adventure rather than, strictly speaking, a landmass mod. We're kind of running low on those, so we'll be looking at, more quest mods in the future that also just happen to include landmasses. But anyway, you'll find a dark and mysterious set of ruins here, and yes, as soon as you arrive, these thunderstorms will start popping up. This is a, cursed island, where the ruins of an ancient Daedric shrine and city have been left buried for thousands of years. And you can see this island here on the map, and it's not too far offshore from the Tygirwulf region, though this is a landmass heavy area, so conflicts may be likely. And anyway, going inside, this all starts out like any Daedric shrine you've been to before. It all looks like a normal Daedric ruin like those found all over Vardenfell, with a number of, Daedra defending the shrine, only, these aren't normal Daedra, they're pretty high level and extremely tough opponents to face. I mean, there's a reason why this mod has a level 30 requirement, and it's partly because this is a very difficult dungeon to fight through. And anyway, you'll eventually find the remains of some excavation party that was exploring the ruins, and ended up getting, killed horribly, but not before leaving a journal behind of their encounters, and I have to say, the overall writing quality in this mod is actually pretty excellent. You'll definitely feel like you're almost living a sort of horror story, but more on that in a moment. Now, there are a few puzzles here that you'll need to figure out in order to access new areas of this ruined Daedric city, which involves, tracking down special gems and placing them in these receptacles. And there's a few puzzles like this in this mod, actually. And in order to find these, you'll need to explore the many dark, overgrown, and ruined passageways of what was once a thriving city of Daedra worshippers that was somehow wiped out in a cataclysmic event that ended with a complete massacre of all the inhabitants. And some ancient horrors still lurk deep in the darkness of these ancient hallways. And for those who don't know, the Ebony Blade is a classic epic adventure quest mod that won the Planet Elder Scrolls Hall of Fame back in the day. It isn't as well known now, sadly, but at one point it was quite popular. And I know it feels a bit silly covering one epic quest mod after another here, and like with the lamp, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers as much as possible. I will say though that if you're a Lovecraftian fan, you'll find a lot to like here. There's been a lot borrowed with this mod's design that's really, quite similar to Lovecraft and Eldritch Core. Indeed, this mod reminds me a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's short story, At the Mountains of Madness, an excellent read that I'd, highly recommend. Though not everyone may like the writing style since it's written a bit like a journal, but anyway, point is, this is a really epic, mysterious, and very atmospheric mod that I'd highly recommend checking out. For NPC Mod of the Week this week, we have Bin Your Companion Mod by the Drunken Mud Crab, and with this mod you'll find a new Argonian NPC hanging out in the House of Earthly Delights in Saran, who offers to be your armed escort for a mere 4,000 gold, and this essentially makes him your new companion. And like most companions, he has, companion share, and although this mod doesn't use all of Grumpy's companion scripts, he does have a quick travel feature so he won't fall, too far behind when following you. And mostly though, he has a ton of unique dialogue, about 300 unique responses according to the author, including lots of information about his personal history, opinions on various subjects and places and the like, and he's actually a very lore-friendly companion since he's actually mentioned in an in-game book already, The Rouse Wedding Dowry, and he has some, rather mixed opinions about the author of that particular novel and how, she betrayed her old gang of friends and thieves, and if you ask him about it enough, he'll eventually give you a quest to track down his old thieving friends from back in the gang and, try and restart his criminal career with you by his side. And this new companion of yours also has his own little home in the Ascadian Isles region, which you can see here, just a small shack with a lot of books, and Benya is a pretty avid reader overall. He definitely likes a good novel. And while this mod doesn't use all of Grumpy's companion scripts, it does have a couple of, combat options, like the ability to tell Benya to use sneaking, so you can, get close to enemies without them realizing. And he does also carry an ebony mace, and also a copy of the lusty Argonian maid with him as well, which is an interesting choice. And in any event, Benya is a pretty useful companion in a fight, and, can definitely hold his own. And with lots of dialogue, background, history, personality, and even a couple of quests associated with him, he's a pretty in-depth companion to have around, and definitely worth checking out. This week's new Meshes and Textures mod of the week is Sky Diversity by SV Engineer 99, and this is quite honestly a pretty large mod, and I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I can in a small showcase like this. And just keep in mind, I'm not an expert, and this is a very complicated mod, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Now, basically, this mod makes the skies of Morrowind more, well, diverse. And it does this by randomly generating new sky textures on the fly and overlaying existing sky textures into additional layers to achieve a more diverse and random effect in sky generation. Again, I'm not a technical expert at this, so some of what I just said may have been incorrect, but anyway, it also generates sky breaks, so during a storm or blizzard or, something like that, you'll occasionally see bits of clear sky and the like. And in addition to all that, as we'll see later on, it generates rainbows during certain weather conditions and auroras during nighttime hours at certain latitudes. And we'll get to all that in a moment. But first things first, there's a new scripted console window that you can open by hitting the Sky Diversity shortcut key in-game. And this will give you a ton of options to change the weather of whatever cell or region you happen to be in. So you can change the weather to cloudy, rainy, ash storms, or what have you. You can also select to generate new sky textures, moon textures, or aurora textures. Change the % chance of auroras or rainbows forming, save the current sky texture if you want to keep it, and much more. Needless to say, this mod has a lot of requirements, a full list of which you can find on the mod download page at the Nexus, but in short, it needs both the newest versions of the Morrowind scripting extender and the Morrowind graphics extender XE in order to work properly. And this mod also requires Skies 4 by Star Wars Gal 9875, as it uses that sky pack as a sort of base to generate new skies with. So you're going to want to grab that as well, and for the purpose of this showcase, I'm going to be generating and showing off these new skies during a number of different weather conditions, so you can see how this all looks, and some of the differences will be quite obvious, and some perhaps not as obvious, but if you directly compare it to Skies 4, you should notice a pretty big visual improvement. Sky Diversity is currently the ultimate and best choice for getting the most out of your Morrowind skies, but keep in mind it is also very resource heavy. You're going to see a lot of framerate drops here, and also the occasional lag spike in this showcase, because it's generating a lot of this stuff in the background, and that uses up a fair amount of resources. So, just keep that in mind. This is more of a medium to high-end rig sort of mod, more or less. And anyway, I'm going to show you guys a bit of several weather conditions, including foggy, rainy, thunderstorms, ash storms, blight, and snowstorms. And there's not too much to comment on with each weather type individually, so I'm just going to let you guys enjoy the video and come back when it's time to show off the auroras. And here you can see one of the auroras, and they're basically multicolored lights in the night sky, and you can see them a lot, especially up in Solstein, but I've seen them occasionally as far south as Plesiad as well, though I think they're a bit rarer in that direction. They do come in a variety of colours, including pink and green as seen here, and even a slight dash of yellow as we'll see later on, and the occasional bit of blue, and they're certainly quite colourful and beautiful looking, and they do add a nice bit of contrast to, the night sky as you're exploring around in the dark. And anyway, we're going to look at a few more, different auroras here to give you guys a sense of the sort of variety you can find here, and then we'll be done with this showcase pretty much. So I'll just, shut up for another minute or so and let the video play in the background here. And that pretty much wraps up this showcase. I know it was extremely long, and if you want to check out more videos of sky diversity, SC Engineer 99 has a YouTube channel with a ton of videos of the different sky breaks and the like that you can see. And I've included a small little annotation here somewhere that will take you to his YouTube channel. And anyway, this is definitely a cool mod that you should check out, assuming, of course, that you have a system that can handle it. Next up we have our Modder's Resource Mod of the Week, which this week is KiteFlyer61's Picture Resource by KiteFlyer61, and this mod adds a few hundred paintings to the game to be used as resources inside your own mods, and they come in two different varieties, static objects and miscellaneous items that you can pick up, and as you can see here, these are primarily Oblivion screenshots added into picture frames within Morrowind, so you can have, Oblivion's scenic beauty within Morrowind without actually having to play Oblivion, which is a pretty big plus, I gotta say. No offense to Oblivion, of course. I believe a few of these screenshots are actually from Nehrim in particular, and I do apologise if I mispronounced that. It's that, the big total conversion mod for Oblivion by the creators of Arcwind for Morrowind. And anyway, this resource package also includes scripts for you to adjust the position and rotation of paintings in game, which is, extremely handy to say the least. And really, this is an extremely easy to use resource. The paintings come already pre-made in a .esp included in the resource package, so you just need to load up your mod with that .esp activated, and pretty much, just drag and drop all the paintings that you want and add them to your mods, and these are extremely useful for decorating interiors. One of the things I actually, really liked about modding Oblivion was the fact that the base game included all these paintings that you could use to, fill up all that empty wall space and make each room feel just a bit more, cozier. And now you can do that in Morrowind 2 with this picture resource, and if you're an interior modder, I'd really highly recommend checking it out. For our underrated mod of the week this week, we have the Daywalker's Grim Armor by the Daywalker, and this is a pretty simple and straightforward mod. It adds a new set of armor outside the temple in Balmora, just, kind of sitting there, and, fair warning, this is not a mod for purists or those who would prefer a challenge to get a, new set of armor. But regardless, this is a sort of Doom-themed armor set that's, well, certainly rather unique looking, I have to say. It sort of has the same rust-colored look as, typical Doom armor. But what's really interesting is the helm portion of this armor set. There's multiple helms included here, I believe about 3 or 4 in total, and they all look, very different, with green eyes and tubes pouring out, steam, which is just a really cool effect to be sure. Just a little, well, again, kind of different from other armor sets that you see in Morrowind. And while there's no real challenge to get this armor set, and, it should be noted, it is a bit on the Uber side in terms of stats, it's still a pretty cool looking armor set and might be worth checking out if you're in the market for, something new to wear into battle. This week's blast from the past of the week is Abu's Retreat by Phobe, and not to be confused with Abu Manor by the same author. Abu's Retreat is a small, common Nordic style estate along the road outside of Fliggerty, and it's a really, beautiful little area with lots of gardens and flowers surrounding the property, though this does make it a bit FPS heavy as well, especially if you're using MGEXE. So just keep that in mind, that performance might take a slight dip. And anyway, in back you'll find a small picnic table where you can, do a bit of outdoor dining. Anyway, heading on inside you'll find the main entry hall here, which is basically a large lounge with furniture surrounding a central roaring fireplace. And just to note, this house does come with a teleport ring for convenience, so you can always, teleport back from, wherever you are on Vardenfell. Naturally, just like any other house mod, there's a master bedroom here which is beautifully decorated and finished, including a master bed, a small cozy fireplace, a breakfast table for, taking meals in the morning, and also a small changing area. And you also find a modest-sized kitchen and dining room with a central dining room table, a large fireplace, and a little bit of space to, prepare meals with. And like the rest of this house, this is a really nice and cozily decorated room with, baskets full of flowers and just a very warm feeling, sort of atmosphere. And on the more practical side of things, you'll find an alchemy lab with a set of low-level alchemical equipment for you to use, not to mention labeled ingredient jars for every ingredient in the game, as well as Tribunal and Blood Moon, and also some alchemical jars for Srai's alchemical ingredients as well. This mod was released in 2003, I believe, so I don't know if it has support for all of, Srai's ingredients or not, but anyway, moving on to another practical room. There's also a small display hall here with a fair number of tables and shelves that you can use for displaying items, including a few small display cases and also a few working armor mannequins for showing off armor and clothing related items. And finally, there's a small ingredient garden here with a sort of, curious greenhouse effect, where you can, harvest ingredients for your patients and the like, and this is just a really nice and scenic home. Finally, for our bonus mod of the week this week, we have Odai Cascade and Dragon Falls by Thunder. And this mod sets out to do 3 main things, really. The first is that it replaces and updates the bridge over the Odai River south of Balmora, making it a Hlaalu style bridge instead of just, a rope bridge, like it was before, which also makes it easier for NPCs and companions to get across, which was a bit of an issue before. And the second and also the main feature here is a lovely set of waterfalls along the Odai River here, across from the Rathane Manor stronghold, so if you're a member of House Hlaalu, you can enjoy a beautiful view from your new estate, or if you're using Avid's Silt Striders mod, you can, get a pretty cool dramatic effect by riding a Silt Strider down to Cedar. Either way, it's a nice, sort of cosmetic feature. And there's also a small path that's been added in along the river here, connecting the main road south of Balmora to the road that goes between Cedar and Hlaalu down in the Bitter Coast region. It's a sort of minor detail, but it does make transportation between these two regions a bit easier. And anyway, that wraps up this episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases. Again, I apologise for the delay here. And next week we'll be taking a scenic tour of Silgrad Tower instead of our usual 13 mod episode. And of course, don't forget Morrowind Modding Madness going on all month long throughout December. and that starts on December 1st, so if you're going to do that, do please register your teams by tomorrow, actually. There's not really a whole lot of time to register teams right now, but in any event, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.